So, what if I told you that in ESXi, you know, VMware's hypervisor host, there is a setting. It's called exec install only, and if you enable it, it's impossible to execute ransomware or any foreign code in the hypervisor host. Have you used it? Why not? It's awesome. Turn it on, we'll get rid of ransomware forever. Cool, right? Or is there a catch? Is there a catch, Nicklas?
Right now, I'm going to take the role as a ransomware associate. So I have gained root access to the ESXi host. You know, I'm partnering with Akira and I schmodded my ransomware, and you know, like Anders said.
Yep, it works.
Yeah, thank you very much. And any questions?
Thank you for coming.
Yeah. No, I'm a skilled elite hacker associate, so by punching one-liner, I can disable this, and here we go. We successfully ransomware this VMware host. And yes, to prove it, it is a, I'm going to show you, we have this sort of extension, .Akira, probably the worst day at work for this owner, system administrator, and also just to show you that the ransomware message as well is to show, okay, for sure, worst day at work ever.
All right. So the setting did work, but they were able to turn it off. So unfortunately, we're going to have to do it the long way and show you how to protect yourself against ransomware the proper way. So, by the way, who are we? My name is Anders. I work at Truesec. I work in incident response. It's not my primary task. I get called in whenever there's a ransomware incident, including VMware. How about you, Nicklas?
Yes, my name is Nicklas Keijser, also at Truesec. My main job is I do malware analysis. I belong to our SOC. Though I also part of the incident response team, anytime there is some kind of malware involved, a lot of ransomware. And yeah, we're here to share, our experience and also how we could maybe solve this. And we were talking about, I think we have done roughly like 50 plus ransomware cases involving ESXi. So this is like, that's the experience we're going to show. Yeah, before we get started, I say, thank you for this fantastic conference, all the organizers. It's amazing, and it's the best receiving I ever had. And also, I just my family is coming down tomorrow. I just want to quote my son. He loves Gothenburg, so Saturday is Liseberg. And he said, he really wants to come here because everyone at Gothenburg are so nice. And I just agree with him. So thank you for having us. Right. Onwards to onwards, yeah, with the ESXi ransomware.
All right. So we're going to go through the why and the how, the how is we're going to show you some actual attack stuff, how this happens in real life. We're going to show you how to recover after an attack. That's a very important part, and also most importantly, how to protect against these attacks so that you don't end up in this situation to begin with. There will be time for Q&A at the end. We will also be here after the talk, and we'll be here at the conference if you want to ask us something. So, backing up a few steps, what is VMware vSphere? Just putting the nomenclature here. So, the main two parts is vCenter Server. That is the management server that manages all the ESXi hosts, all the virtual machines, the settings, data stores, networks, everything. vCenter Server is Linux. It runs on a proper Linux called Photon. It's VMware's own Linux distro. So if you want to do forensics on this one, you can use your regular Linux forensics tools. Then you also have to get the logs from the application, the vCenter server, because it's an important part in the attack, as we will show in a bit. Then we have the ESXi hosts. This is where the virtual machines run. This is where the attackers eventually execute the ransomware. ESXi is not Linux. Sort of. It's kind of Linux. It looks like Linux, but it's not. And I'm going to show you some very important differences.
It's not, but sort of Linux.
Yeah.
We will get back to that.
I'm not taking that debate now, okay? So it has some oddities. For example, you can't run EDR or any kind of malware protection in ESXi. You have to rely on just sending out logs over syslog and analyzing and alerting on those logs. Anyone who has done this will see immediately there is a lot of logs being spewed out when you point to a syslog server. Have you tried it? Anyone? Yeah. So you need to do some filtering. You don't do kind of sudo in ESXi. Basically, if you're in the ESXi host, you are almost always a root user. There are no use cases, basically, for non-root users. And we're going to get back to that as well. It's a purpose-built appliance, which is good. It's supposed to run virtual machines and nothing else. You're not supposed to have users, not supposed to have other software in it. In fact, the file system gets rebuilt every time you boot the host. It reads the installation packages, builds the file system. Then when you do shutdown, it tears it down again, and you begin again from scratch. We can use this. This is good, because that makes it difficult for an attacker to get persistence. It also allows us to whitelist binaries, as we showed in the beginning. So the feature is there, it's just that, unfortunately, it can be disabled still. So vSphere is an attractive ransomware target, as we know. The threat actors can get in and just encrypt everything in one swoop, rather than having to own each particular virtual machine and the OS. All of these clips are from 2021. This is basically the year when all the good ransomware gangs started attacking vSphere. So basically, they took their Linux ransomware binary, adapted it to work in ESXi as well. Nicklas is going to deep dive into that in a bit. And they're updated their playbooks and tools to attack and find vSphere environments. So if you have vSphere or any other hypervisor platform in your environment, if there's a ransomware attacker in your environment, they will look for it, they will try to attack it. So you need to protect it.
There's also like an extra slide I noticed in the goodie bag, which we'll not mention, but you might figure out belongs to this as well. So yeah,
yes.
Sorry. Thank you, SecurityFest, for providing an extra slide as a sticker in the.
If you work for a service provider, you also need to protect your vSphere environment. Yeah, so yeah, lots of new variants, but the thing about the new variants, there's very little difference. They still use the same techniques to get in and do the encryption. So if you can protect against the first 100 variants, you can protect against the new ones. Don't worry about the new ones, get your protection in place. And we're going to get to that part as well. So what we want to convey here is you can protect yourself. This is sorry about my Venn diagram in PowerPoint here. What we want to convey is that this orange part, it's red now, those that do get hit usually haven't done much when it comes to architecture and operations, securing that. And they usually haven't done much about a proper MDR in place. So managed detection and response on the rest of the environment. So those who do, don't often get hit, all right? So I'm going to get back to some recommendations in a bit and just try to get started on this journey. So how do these attacks happen? Well, it looks like any kind of attack. An attacker gets a foothold somewhere. I'm not going to get into that at the moment. They do command and control. They move on, look around, usually for the Active Directory. They usually get the Active Directory, domain admin somehow. Same thing there, 100 different ways to do this. Not going to get into the details. And then they usually just walk from Active Directory into the vCenter server, because the organizations usually use Active Directory to authenticate vCenter admins. So the attackers don't even need to use any vulnerabilities or tricks. They just log in. And this is 80 or 90% of the successful attacks that we see. They take this path. They can also attack vCenter server and ESXi more directly, but then they need to use some kind of unpatched vulnerability, gross misconfiguration, weak passwords, reused passwords, so on. And it's not as common. So then when they own the vCenter server, they can now change the passwords on any account on the ESXi host. Is there anyone who doesn't agree with that statement? If I, as an attacker, own your vCenter server, I also own your ESXi hosts. Good. And from there, they upload their ransomware, they execute it. The ransomware goes to the data stores, that's where the virtual machine files live. The path is /vmfs/volumes, and they encrypt everything there. Or, different ransomwares do it differently, which Nicklas will dive into in a bit. So they encrypt the files. And yeah, everything's down. Now you reach for your backups. Well, so have they. They put a lot of effort into finding your backups and deleting them so that they increase their chances of getting paid, of course. They want you to be in a really bad state, desperate to get back on track. So how do we fix this? Well, basically, try to divide these two things. Where the workload zone, the blue one here, where your servers, your Active Directory, users, all of that runs, should not be connected to the backend, to the management zone, the infrastructure zone, where you run your hypervisor, storage, backups should be extra protected, of course, but networking and all of that. That should be protected. So there shouldn't be an easy way in. That's step one. That's good architecture. Backups, as I said, protect them the same way, but better. There should be no way for the attacker to delete your backups. Make them immutable, air gap them, do whatever you want, but make sure that they cannot be deleted, even if the rest of the environment is totally owned. Yeah, so because in the workload zone, this is where we have internet in and out, we have users, we have emails, people clicking links. This is definitely where the attacks will start, right? So let them, but don't let them get to the green zone. This should be secure. Think of it as an airport, It's easy, anyone can walk up to the check-in counter, but if you want to get to the air side where the planes are, you need to go through screening, security, and all of that. That's how your environments should look like as well.
So, like when you reach sort of the end game, you saw we are sort of close to ransomwareing the ESXi. The attacks always follow a similar pattern here. So what we put up in, let's say it's red here, it's yellow on my screen, that's sort of stuff they might do, and the blue stuff is stuff they always do. So they might start with port scanning and do some logging. They might change the password of the ESXi. Though what they always do, they always enable SSH. Otherwise, that's how they get the terminal to execute their code. After that, they always transfer the ransomware binary from sort of the host that they have compromised into the ESXi. And that's also like, that's always happens. Depending if it's a good or a bad ransomware, I mean, it's a weird terminology saying good or bad ransomware, but sort of what they sort of usually do is they want to shut down the VM before encrypting it. Some, they do it sort of by manually using the built-in tooling. Some actually build it inside the binary. We will show that later on. And then, as you saw on the screen, like when I played the crappy ransomware affiliate, I shmodded the binary, I disabled the running sort of unsigned code, and then I execute the ransomware. So these attacks always follow this flow, which sort of, as a defender, we can utilize this because it's predictable. But sort of, if we deep dive into sort of some attacks that you have encountered, some forensics.
Yep. Oops. So we see this in the logs. This is from an actual incident. You see some task being created here by a user called VPX user. So VPX user is the service account in ESXi that vCenter uses to manage it. And the logs also show us which user in turn authenticated against the vCenter server. And we see it was the Active Directory domain. So there's like domain / admin something user. So they had like stolen that account, used it to get into the vCenter server. So what do? They run this command. This command changes a password on a local ESXi account called DCUI. Why not root? Well, like I said, it doesn't matter. All of the default accounts in ESXi have root privileges, so they can use any one of them. Then they open SSH. So remember, if someone says, protect ESXi by never opening SSH, yes, good advice. But if they are an admin in vCenter, they can open SSH. So don't forget that. So then they log in. You see all the accounts the commands are being run by this DCUI user. So they uninstall HA, then they list all the running VMs, and then they kill all the running VMs. And they do this for each ESXi host. And why do they kill all the running VMs? To encrypt them, exactly. So while a virtual machine is running, it is locked on the disk. So they cannot encrypt the disk files while it's running. So that's why they have to shut them down first. So this is some sample code to do what we just saw. You set some variables, you exit lockdown mode, another protection feature in ESXi, which is great, but can be disabled if they own your vCenter server. Then you change the root password in this case, and open SSH. So I'm allowed to do this if I own your vCenter server, or if I have an account with admin privileges. So how does this look like from the victim's perspective? Well, the victim gets a phone call from someone who basically says, oh, all the applications are down. Again, this is because everything got shut down to encrypt it. So you'll try to get to the vCenter server to see what's going on. It's also going to be down, probably, because it usually runs as a virtual machine in its own environment. The ESXi hosts, they will still be available. You can get to the web interface, but depending on how the threat actor got in, you might or might not be able to use your own root password because they have changed it in order to get in themselves. Then you try to reboot the ESXi host, and it might or might not survive, depending on the ransomware. So you might get a message like this, and this is in the case where the ransomware has encrypted everything, including these installation packages that I told you about, that ESXi reads upon boot and builds the file system from. So, depending on which ransomware, this might or might not work. So, tell us more about these ransomwares.
So if we deep dive into a few samples, like I love malware analysis, so bear with me now, but sort of to understand them on the depth. One of them, sort of, let's begin with a more sort of mundane one called ESXi Args. And that one sort of went through the internet and tried to find ESXi interfaces directly to the internet and tried to ransomware them. And just when it happened, I did a show and search to see like how many got ransomware. What you could do is actually do the query for how to restore your files, because that was actually part of the HTML header of the ransomware message. So roughly like 2,000 sort of 1 week afterwards. And you remember that sort of the flight zone Anders showed you, where you should take the admin or the user space and the sort of this security space. So by sort of enabling SSH logging through internet, I mean, as an admin, it's super convenient. You can sit home and do my stuff. But sort of what do you say, Anders, who is the specialist? Good or bad practice?
Yeah, no, just no. I mean, my advice was for the internal network, but putting it on the internet is just a bad idea. How many of you have done that? Don't answer that.
No.
Come talk to us afterwards.
You probably have this, you probably can read this message if you have done it, so this was kind of a cleansing fire. But if we sort of deep dive into what they did, this is a sort of good example how all this ransomware works, but it was sort of divided into two things that's easier to understand, because it contained one script that did everything else than the encryption, and it had a separate binary that will do the encryption. So it will drop the binary in the temp folder, which like 99% of the ransomware do it. They love the temp folder. What's so special with the temp folder? After reboot, it disappears. It deletes everything in the temp folder. So it's convenient for the threat actors. It will find and kill all the VMs, and then it iterates through all the files and then pass it on as an argument for the encryption algorithm that sort of will do the encryption. Remove all log files and then start an SSH server. So if we deep dive into this sort of script, there's some highlights I want to show you. You want to drop the stuff in the temp folder. As I said, that's the first thing it does. Is even call it clean directory. It is sort of looking for the different VMs and try to sort of find them. And this is sort of a preparation before killing them. And sort of, if you look at this one, you see that it uses the ESXi CLI to find them. But then it uses kill-9 to kill the VMs. And what do you say? Is that good or bad practice?
It's not really good practice, but I don't think they care much about clean shutdowns or not.
So yeah, remember, it is kind of Linux-ish, so some stuff works,
yep.
Some don't. Keep that in mind, And then it will actually sort of do all this stuff. It will pass the argument to the encryption. It also contains a public key, which sort of, for the thing is, it actually encrypts the files, as ransomware do, and then it generates the symmetric key, encrypts the file, and then encrypts the symmetric key with the asymmetric public key, and encrypts the key and puts it in the file header. That's sort of usually how ransomware works. So it combines these two styles. The main function of this, the ransomware itself, here you have this part where it's sort of encrypting and generating the RSA files. So this is like where the badness is really happening. One interesting part as well with the ESXi args, has this help file. So indicating something, so you could actually like, please, Mr. Ransomware, how do I use you? And here you go. And it's actually very common. It's a weird thing. This sort of, for me, it indicates, this kind of associate program, they are user as well of a program. They sometimes need help to run their, stuff. Also, it's sort of inside this sort of, if you're looking at ransomware, you should look for these sort of calls. This is called the ransomware sandwich. So it first reads the file, then it sort of tries to see the end of the file, then it makes it sort of encryption stuff, and then put it back into the file. So this is called the ransomware sandwich. So if you see this stuff combined, you have found where the encryption is taking part. So this is the ESXi args. Moving on to another sample called Babuk. And what's so special with this one? This actually was leaked. The source code of this ransomware was leaked online. So all of a sudden, you said 2022 was like all the good ransomware actors are utilizing. 2023 became the year where all the crappy ones also can just, clone this one and, make your own. And to see here, it has this kind of log file as well. It sort of looks through the files and tries to encrypt it. And sort of what it does, it actually has a few files, sort of what it kind of, I just want to encrypt this one. So it looks for the .log, .vmdk, .vman, .vsp, and these are the only files that it will encrypt.
That's nice.
That's nice.
So this is one of the good ones. You can call it that.
And then you have the .babuk as the extension, which sort of, remember my files got .akira, this one got babuk at the end of it, sort of. And at the end, we can see it calls the encrypt function. One interesting feature with this one I found is it has this sort of calculate size function. And if we start looking for this one, I stumble upon this question on Stack Overflow from 13 years ago. So how do you convert a number of bytes into file size in C? And Stack Overflow, has a friendly user base. Replied, this is how you do it. And then if you take the source code from Babuk and place it next to it, it's identical. What I'm showing, I don't think this is like it was the ransomware developer who asked it, but probably the ransomware developer ran into the same problem. So he went on Stack Overflow and copied the code. So even ransomware developers are probably users of, friendly forums for, whatever you want to do. One of the things you could do, like one of the interesting features with Babuk, it actually uses a symmetric encryption called Susamanuk, which is a bit weird. Because most of us, we use AES when we do symmetric encryption. This was like, it's a French encryption, and it has this sort of, before initializing, it has this constant, which we can actually utilize as more as a threat intelligence. So what I did is actually, I built this sort of Yara rule, where I can utilize this thing. So I look for files, sort of, that has .log, .vmdk, .vmm, and that stuff, but doesn't add the Babuk extension. So I want to look for everything except Babuk. And also I add this sort of all these constants, because these are binary codes that will be embedded within the binary to find like, can I find other copycats of Babuk? And I did. And there are a bunch of them. So we have lowered the threshold for this stuff. And also the people at Sentinel-1 did a really cool article about this. And, have a bunch of them that just copy the code. If we look at a third and the last example I will show you, it's the ABOS locker, which I would say it's a more, let's say, advanced one. And you remember the other one, they look for files they want to encrypt. ABOS locker, they look for something else. They would look for exclusion instead. So instead of looking for specific files, they are encrypt everything except these folders. And encrypt everything except these extensions. So as you see here, it has .crypt and .tmp. So that .crypt, that's the extension of the ransomware. If you have ransomware, so it doesn't want to ransomware itself again. So, it's whitelist itself. It also contains this sort of lol bins, which we call like ESXi lol bins. So it looks for the running VMs and then shuts them down with the proper ESXi VM process kill command instead of kill-9. So this is actually bundled within the binary. So this is the first thing it will do before shutting it down. From one of these incidents, we actually managed to pull out the bash history, which is kind of interesting. I'm going to show you. And remember what Anders said about ESXi. What kind of operating system is it? Almost Linux. Yep. So if we look at the people at, this is probably like associate. So this is the bash history. First, remember it has a dir, so now it's not Windows. We know that.
We can agree on that. It's not Windows.
And then it started LSing, and then started schmod. And you see, it was actually called -UPX, so it was packed. And then after a while, you have the uname.a. So they don't. Where am I? Like, why is not stuff working? So, and uname.a gives me, it's a VM kernel. And then it continues to do more stuff. And you see, like, it could be hard, like, which direction should I put my slashes? So it is hard to be a ransomware actor. Like, is it a Linux? No. Is it a Windows? Definitely not.
Still not.
Still not. And then, the sudo.su, that doesn't work on an ESXi. So no, it's not Linux completely. We have the bin.bash, doesn't exist on the ESXi. LDD doesn't exist either. So it is tricky to be a ransomware actor. And it continues onwards, like, they push the uname 3 times. So they really want to make sure, like, is this Linux or not? No. Maybe it gives different outputs if I put it in several times. I don't know. But eventually, you see down here, they managed the stuff to work. But you see, all of a sudden, we had the ABIS, not the UPX one. So probably the first one didn't work properly. So they need to pull down the second one that would work for them. And then they always have this sort of work.log. That's usually, we've seen it in several threat actors. They like to put stuff in a log file to see, like, how is the stuff running.
So we can safely say they're not using automation here.
Yeah. Or super crappy automation.
Yep.
You never know. Or like 5-dimensional chess, like, I don't know. I would like to put a suggestion out here, like, if we move into the threat intel side. You might have seen this one from the people at Microsoft, how we should name threat actors. I have a different suggestion for this, because the thing is, I do strongly believe these are bad people doing bad things. I mean, they are ransomwaring hospitals and schools, and they're just bad people. So instead of turning to Microsoft, I think we should turn to Captain Underpants, because they have this kind of Professor Poopy Pants name change or chart 2000, which sort of, you should take the first letter of the first name, the first letter of the second name, and the last letter of the last name. So, for instance, ABIS Lockerden, it will become Stinky Liver Buns. I think that's an appropriate threat actor name. And if we do the same thing for Lockbit, that will become Booger Toilet Sniffer. So, my gift to you, threat intel community, throw Microsoft down the toilet and use Captain Underpants. I think that's more appropriate. So, once this is done, how do we recover from a ransomware? Tell us, Anders.
Yeah. So now we've been encrypted. Everything is down. Everything is bad. Everyone's running around screaming. What do we do? Well, first of all, don't touch stuff, please. This is a crime scene. You might ruin very important evidence. You are allowed to pull network cables, but don't pull power cables, because we need the stuff that's running to do our forensic work properly. Call your incident response team. They will tell you what to do. But yes, you can pull network cables. You can cut your internet access if you want to. And of course, don't pay the ransom. Again, that's a long discussion. Not going to get into it. Our message is don't pay the ransom. Then your backups are important, of course, right? So do you have backups? Are they relevant? Are they backing up the right stuff? Do they work? This stuff you should know even if you've never had a ransomware incident. So please test your backups, make sure they work. That's what they're for, restoring. Second of all, have they been encrypted or deleted by the threat actor? Same thing there. Make sure they're immutable, air-gapped, everything. And then if we do have working backups, which restore point do we go back to in time? And this is a very important question. I hear a lot of weird recommendations here. So let's say now it's Saturday. On Fridays when we had this phone call, that's when the encryption happened. So what we're going to do together with the customer is kind of build the timeline backwards as we discover forensic evidence. And the customer is going to check, do they have working backups? And hopefully, we will end up in a situation that we have working backups. In this case, nightly backups, every night they work. We can pick and choose from these backups which ones to restore. And the forensics will tell us eventually, let's say they got the Active Directory on Wednesday, and it was on Tuesday that the threat actor got into the environment. Now, we have two choices now. Do we restore the backup from Tuesday before the threat actor got in, or do we restore the backup from Friday night before the encryption happened? How many of you pick Tuesday? 0, 1. How many of you pick Friday? And the rest of you don't restore the backups at all. Okay.
Pay the ransomware.
Yes. So our recommendation is always go for the latest one. Go for Friday. Do you see any problems with that? Yes, you will be restoring virtual machines with a threat actor in them. Yes. So you just don't put them back online, clean them, put them in some kind of isolation, use your forensic data to know what you need to clean. That's the only proper way to do it, because you can't tell your customer, oh, by the way, we're going to make you lose 4 days of data. What if the threat actor got in 2 weeks ago? Are you going to tell them, oh, you're going to lose 2 weeks of data? That's horrible. So always go for the latest one, do the cleaning. All right, so next question. When we restore these virtual machines, what do we restore them onto? We can't do cleaning on an underlying dirty environment, right? So this is why it's extra important as well, to protect your vSphere environment from getting affected. Then you can just kind of get a head start here and just start restoring. Instead of, oh, now we need to clean the vCenter server as well and the ESXi hosts. How do you do that? That's a long discussion. I'm not going to get into it now. So just try to avoid ending up there, okay? So how do we protect? I've told you you need to do some protection. How do we do it? Well, this is kind of a top 10 list of mine. Again, protect your backups. I think I've said it 5 times now. It's very important. Segment vSphere network-wise from the rest. That's the blue and the green box. Segment it identity-wise as well. Don't use your primary Active Directory or catalog to authenticate vCenter users.
If you take one picture of our slide deck, this is the one. But wait until you reach point 10.
There are 10 bullet points.
Yeah.
So these are architectural recommendations. Ready. So then again, use EDR, XDR, SIM, whatever you have. Protect the rest of your environment so you can spot these attacks before they reach your vSphere environment. And in vSphere, send your logs using syslog to a SIM system. Make sure someone looks at these logs and can react to them 24/7. It's no point in having logging and monitoring if nothing happens, if nobody can do anything over the weekend. Install security updates, that's a low-hanging fruit. Don't forget VMware tools. Don't use bad passwords, use MFA wherever you can. Like getting from this blue zone to the green zone, force MFA. You probably have ways to do that. So these are more operational recommendations. Then look at hardening. There is a vSphere hardening guide, has a lot of good advice. Prevent foreign code execution, that's the one I started with. I'm going to get into some more details about it. And if we have time, I'm going to try to also explain how we can prevent lateral movement. Now you can take the pictures. So this is more config hardening. And the reason why I'm categorizing these is because I want to hammer in the message that good security is not about just buying a product or making one hardening thing. You have to do the whole thing, architecture and operations and configuration. So get moving on this, but you don't have to do everything perfectly. If you haven't done any of these, start by doing 2. If you've done 2 of these, do 2 more. They don't have to be perfect. Just get moving. Don't be the slowest camper that the bear is going to catch. So, diving back into how we're doing on time. A couple of minutes. Exec install only, like I said, prevents execution of foreign code that didn't get installed in a VMware VIB file. That's the installation package. These are assigned by VMware or their partners. If you Google exec install only, up until recently, you got a picture of me.
And this is not because I wrote a lot about it, it's because VMware wrote very little about it. So there were no explanations on how to use this excellent feature. Their explanations was about enforcing it, which is a completely different thing, or how to disable it. I don't think you should disable it. I think you should use it. So it comes in 3 different flavors, and this is where it gets confusing as well, even for VMware. So there is a boot kernel setting. This one has been available forever. If you run vSphere 5, I hope you don't, you can enable it, but it's not on by default. There is a runtime setting in ESXi 8 and newer. It's on by default. And that's the one that Nicklas easily turned off in the demo. And then there's this enforcing of the setting, where you kind of use TPM to make sure the setting doesn't get tampered with. But this can also be disabled, so it's not really useful. So again, runtime setting, easily disableable. Then you can run your whatever binary. Boot kernel setting. This is the one I'm going to recommend that you actually turn on, even though you also have the runtime setting. Because even if a threat actor switches it back to false, they will not be able to run the ransomware until also rebooting the host. So now you've bought yourself 5 minutes. Is that enough for you to find this and react? Maybe, maybe not. But they have to do it for all the ESXi hosts. So someone is probably going to notice. But then you need to know what to do. Okay, you have a threat actor. They're hovering their finger on the encryption button. What do you do? This is a good thing to plan ahead, not when it's happening. So yeah, enforcement, same thing. It can be turned off. No big deal. Good thing about ESXi is that all of this gets logged. This is a good reason to upgrade to 8 if you haven't already. So this is me trying to execute the binary and failing. This is me turning off the protection. It gives a really angry message, basically saying, hey, you're going to get ransomware if you do this. Pretty clear, right? And this is me succeeding in executing the file after I turned off the protection. And there is also a warning in the web UI that you cannot remove if you turn off the setting. So, upgrade to 8. I said it's difficult to get persistence in ESXi. That's very true, but there was a supposedly Chinese APT group that succeeded. They found a way to trick ESXi into accepting their VIB packages, the installation packages, although they were not signed. And how did they do that? They added the switch -- force when they installed it, and ESXi like, oh, cool, I'll install this. This is not fixed. This still applies. So do you have persistent APTs in your ESXi hosts? Maybe you do. How do you find out? Turn on UEFI secure boot. Then this is going to be impossible. Right? Great post by Mandiad. Please go read it. So if secure boot, you enable it in the underlying physical host where you run ESXi. So reboot the host, turn on secure boot, it's going to boot up again. You don't have to kind of reinstall. You can do it on existing ESXi hosts. Very easy, just go home, do it tomorrow, or Friday, or Monday. Yeah, so it's going to prevent all of this. This is supposed to be prevented, but you have to do this as well. Do we have time for this? I think we have like
a few minutes. This is short. Cool. Though I would say like all the stuff we showed, also this is kind of where we're working on research and we've come quite far and we want to share this. Is that sort of logging and detection is possible. So what we have sort of built is we forward the syslog to a sort of a log proxy, and then we can send it over to, we are working with Sentinel and Falcon. And the sort of what we're doing is we filter out all the noise because it's very verbose. But if you focus,
hence the big arrow. Yeah, that's my PowerPoint skills.
But yeah, it is. If you just focus, like if you understand the attack path, that's like the stuff we should focus on, and that's how we build the filters. And alert on the crucial steps here, like stuff happening that sort of is a strong indication that you have a threat actor in your environment. So, for instance, this is from Sentinel. When you enable SSH, as you can sort of surveil this one and alert on it, it's a very clear indication something is about to happen. It might be an admin. But yeah, it depends on context. But if you have eyes on it, you can alert on it and be aware. And as we told about how we all started this. Like we turned off this execute install. This is from the Sentinel, and you see the red box over there. Unknown content can cause malware attacks similar to ransomware. I think that's quite clear. Like this is not an alert I want in my environment. And then you have time to react. So this is a very clear alert that indicates we now it's time to respond. So, in summary, hypervisor attacks are on, like, let's say, I would say, exponential growth, because it makes sense from the attacker's point of view. Instead of ransomwaring every client, you can ransomware everything. It's a ring zero encryption, so you can bring down the whole data centers. Danish data centers has gone bankrupt due to this. Though, as we have discussed, like all the attacks, they have the same pattern. So you can build detection for it. It's not impossible. It's not infinite variations you can attack at ESXi. So if you leverage that, we're in a strong positions.
Yep. And again, immutable backups are very important. Please get them. And the vSphere cannot run EDR or agents. And that ties into the first point. That's why it's kind of vulnerable to these kinds of attacks. Good. So before we go to Q&A, we just want to say thank you very much for coming to our talk. I hope you got some good advice.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Really interesting.
Yes. Who has the first question?
Exactly. Raise your hand. Or hand.
One over there.
We have one.
Oh my God, it's so far away. I'm running.
And when I said thank you for coming to our talk, I made it sound like you had a choice.
Exactly. The illusion. So who was it? Come on. Now it would be funny if someone over there said, no, it was me. Here you go.
So great talk.
Thank you.
When it comes to turning off the local exec protections, why do people do it in their ESXi environment? Like, what's the use case? What kind of software are they even trying to run on their ESXi hosts?
So was the question why
do they do it, and what kind of software is it that users are disabling this protection to actually run?
Yeah, the thing is, my point is that I think VMware should make the setting permanent, so it's not possible to disable it. And what's keeping them is probably some third-party stuff that still runs inside ESXi, although they've been told for the last 7 or 8 years, move to the outside, use the APIs instead. So, there are very few legitimate use cases for running foreign software in ESXi. And 99.9% of ESXi hosts don't need to. It's just this fraction of customers running old stuff that's keeping this from progressing. I hope this will be a permanent setting in the next version. We'll see. Don't quote me on it.
Anyone else? You can do it.
Yes.
All over. It's a workout. It's a workout. I'm just kidding. Too soon. Go.
We all know that VMware is not the leading, at least in growth, hypervisor anymore. Do you have any research or how-to guides for the other hypervisors that are out here that basically do the same but are implemented for the other hypervisors?
I would say the architectural advice goes for any hypervisor. Like, don't let it be reached from the regular network. The other stuff is much more specific. There is no exec install only in Hyper-V because it's Windows, right? Yeah, so it's much more difficult, and that's what's good with having ESXi as a purpose-built appliance. So yeah, most of the overarching stuff is the same, but we don't have as much data. Well, we don't. I think we have colleagues who do, for Hyper-V at least.
Yeah, it's...
Yeah, come back next year. Maybe we'll bring that in as well. Thank you.
One more?
Yeah, we're going to be around here after the talk. If you have a question that you didn't want to blurt out, we're going to be here at the conference. I have to leave after lunch today, but Nicklas is here, so go talk to him tonight if you have any more questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.